What's up, Lego builders? Welcome back to Coconut Brick Studios. It's finally here, the first week of building an Imperial base on Mimban. In my announcement video, I went over my vision for this project, but didn't talk about the actual size or shape of it, in large part because I still didn't know myself. So today I'm going to figure out how much space I have to work with and start some of the underground building. I also have a killer Minifig Haul to unpack, and it's only week 1, but this mock is already testing my patience. So if you're ready for the first large-scale Imperial mock of the channel, don't forget to execute Order 66 on that like button, and let's get started. First things first, I got my tables cleaned and it's time to lay out the mock and see exactly how big it's going to be. I haven't built a mock with a footprint around this size since 2020, so it'll be interesting to see how much space I'm working with, because up until I laid these out, I wasn't sure how many base plates I'd be using. So this is my first time getting to see what the actual layout is that I'm going to be working with, and this is perfect. Megito was a real eye-opener for me. The last mock series I did, I realized scaling down a little bit and focusing more on detail, story, fun building was so much more enjoyable than just trying to go as big as possible. And now I can start to figure out where everything's going to go. I'm thinking from this line onward to the end of the mock will be the Imperial complex. So we're going to have a large Imperial base at an angle coming out this direction. Across the way, we're going to have a large landing pad for Imperial shuttles, transport ships, high-ranking officials, because on top of the base, I'm planning to have a smaller landing pad for TIE fighters and stuff like that. So this will be for more of like the non-combat transport ships. And then dividing the wilds of Mimban from the Imperial base will be a trench that'll take up probably about half of this gray base plate area, probably about that much. I don't want it to be too big because, you know, the trenches typically aren't massive. And then that'll run all the way across, splitting the mock in half. And then everything this way is just going to be wild Mimban terrain. On this little section over here, I'm going to have a big hill, kind of like this, with a bunch of burnt out little trees to represent a forest that got firebombed or something like that. And then over here in this middle section is going to be kind of like a vehicle graveyard. I want this to look like an old battlefield that took place, you know, maybe right before or right after this Imperial base was formed. So we're going to have broken rebel tanks, pieces of Imperial vehicles, and then I want to have some Mimbanese rebels hiding amongst the wreckage, waiting to ambush an Imperial patrol that's currently exiting the Imperial base. Then over here, you know, will probably just be a continuation of that. I'm not 100% sure. And then right here on this side, I'm going to have a little tunnel underneath the terrain. It's going to be digging its way towards the trench, with the Mimbanese rebels trying to like pop out and ambush the Imperials inside the trench. Now you may notice there are some chunks missing. I do have 2 more gray base plates to put there. They are just currently in use for a secret project coming up. But don't worry, it's not Naboo. And the reason there's a gap here is I just don't have enough 32 by 32 base plates. That's not a huge deal though. I obviously don't need to have this whole thing laid out by the end of this week. So when I run to Walmart this week, I'll probably just pick up some more of those. And by the next episode, all the gaps will be in. But now that everything is laid out, I can finally start building. Mimban is going to be a weird height. I normally build tall mountains or flat cities, but this one's in between the two because there are no mountains but trenches and holes in the ground, which means I need to raise all of the terrain up high enough to be able to build underneath the ground level. And one of the first subterranean builds is a secret tunnel. This will be a cross-section look at the rebels digging towards the Imperial trench in order to break through and ambush the soldiers inside without having to fight their way through all the defenses. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the classic coconut rockwork, but I don't think that style is fitting for underground. I need something smoother and more rounded. I'm building what's called snot rockwork, where I use headlight bricks to attach slopes on their side to the wall instead of straight up and down. This means I can use these rounded slopes with a more curved front to shape the wall. It's painstaking work, but I've been practicing this technique and the end result is worth the extra effort. I want to light the tunnel as well, so I added headlight bricks and clips to the wall to hold lanterns and allow wires to pass through the rockwork. This should not only make it easier to see inside the tunnel, but make it feel a lot more realistic. I blocked off the end with black brick and turned my attention to the floor. This is being carved through stone, but the surface above is very muddy, and in this time of war I doubt the rebels are investing in doormats, so lots of dirt and grime has been tracked down by people coming and going and hauling stuff out, thus creating a path of dirt running along the ground. I added little pieces to the tunnel sides as well to make it look more messy. I was thinking about making the roof of the tunnel sloped, but decided on making it flat since it's easier and I want to add some tunnel supports holding it up. I found this molded piece that would have been perfect, but sadly I only had one, so I had to build a custom support. I don't know if tunnel supports are even needed this close to the surface, but I thought it would look cool and add some realism to the scene. I basically just built a taller version of the molded piece, which turned out pretty good, and everything was going great up until I went to install the support. After I finished crying, I wiped my tears away and finished putting it in, and it looks right at home inside the tunnel. I added a couple of crates of supplies to further complete the scene. Since the mock is going to be raised up so high, I need to build a foundational wall around the entire thing. At first I was just going to make the whole thing reddish brown, but that would have gotten expensive really fast, so I decided to use dark bluish gray to represent bedrock under the dirt and mud. I then took it a step further and built these cool designs into the terrain, since bedrock isn't completely flat and has its own little peaks and valleys. Now I have a pleasing transition from rock to dirt. As I get better at this, I want to add fossils of creatures into the side wall as fun Easter eggs. This mock series is going to be full of new builds and techniques, and a big one I've been wanting to try is with the terrain. Normally when doing it, I just get a bunch of 16 by 16 plates and cover whatever it is I'm building, or build on a base plate. But Mimban is a battlefield with trenches and craters everywhere, so I wanted to have lots of variation in the height of the terrain. To get that, I connected 4 16 by 16 plates at varying heights. That way I can build whatever I need, but still have a strong and somewhat connected foundation. During a live stream, I put this idea to the test and made a patch of Mimban terrain. I was able to build a long trench and crater in the ground, but still have the whole thing look like it's all relatively at the same height, and there was still room for some mostly flat spots for figs and vehicles. I'm super happy with how this prototype turned out, so now it's time to build and repeat. I started by building the craters. The ground changes color the deeper you go, so I started with a base of medium nougat and tried to gradually transition from that to dark orange and then to reddish brown on top. This is a slow process of placing various wedge plates in a way that creates a somewhat round shape. I found the smaller wedge plates are especially useful. Once the hole is in, I blended it into the surrounding area with brick and small slopes. Since this is an explosion crater, I added different colored pieces laying around that were flung out by the blast. For the flat areas, I'm using reddish brown plate and adding some brick to create small hills to break up the terrain. This is a very part-intensive way of building terrain, but the results speak for themselves, and a lot of this mock is going to be terrain, and I want it to be just as interesting to look at as the base area. I don't want every hole to look the same, so I'm going to build a long, shallow one, maybe a trench of some kind that was abandoned before it was finished being dug. I'm telling you, this terrain portion is going to be so cool. I have all kinds of ideas for half-sunken vehicles and little bridges spanning muddy pools. I'm so excited to finally be building Mimban. I was watching a channel called True Squadron build Geonosis, and instead of building all the terrain at once like I normally do, he's building smaller patches of the ground and connecting them together. I was intrigued and decided to test this method out by building 32 by 32 stud sections of terrain and securing them inside the frame I built. I also got the idea for staggering the plates from him, so shout out to True Squadron for the great ideas. Alright, let's see how everything's coming together so far. The tunnel looks great. I'm happy I went with the snot rockwork instead of the style I normally use, since this looks carved or shaped by tools rather than being naturally eroded by wind and rain, which wouldn't happen underground. Although I'm still not sure what I'll have the rebels digging the tunnel with, since pickaxes and hammers feel a little outdated in a mock with plasma rifles and lightsabers. The transition from regular to inverted slopes looks a little too sharp in some spots, but overall I feel like this is a pretty realistic looking build. The lights illuminate it perfectly and add some great color contrast. My only critique is that the tunnel might be too tall. Since the rebels have to dig and remove everything to form it, the tunnel would most likely be just tall enough for them to stand up in, as this would be the most efficient way to dig, but if it were shorter it'd be harder to build the right shaped walls and add stuff like supports and lights, so I'll probably just leave it as is. I do want some feedback on the supports though. Should I have 1 or 2 at each spot? 2 is how many would be in an actual tunnel, but this is a cross-section view with one side cut away, and the second one does impede your view inside, so let me know in the comments which option you prefer. The terrain is just beautiful. I used to see Mimban as a boring, lumpy brown mud pit, but after seeing other people's interpretations with dark orange and medium nougat highlights, I realized I could do so much more with the ground. It would make sense to see different colors in the dirt, especially in craters and trenches where clay and other stuff has been exposed. I went from dreading terrain work to loving it. Plus now I have an excuse to buy more dark orange and medium nougat pieces. Building the terrain like this is a game changer. I can take my time building section by section and focus more on smaller details and better layout where I want craters or broken vehicles to be in relation to each other. Plus I can move the sections around if I need to, or don't like how certain ones fit together. The wall detailing is coming along nicely as well. This isn't a super important or interesting part of the mock, but I do think this looks much better than having just a plain wall. It makes the whole mock feel more cohesive and connected. To finish off the week, I'm unboxing a sweet minifig haul from the Minifig Co. I was actually buying World War II stuff for my second YouTube channel and happened to see that they had Mimban stuff as well. I got capes, some with mud and some clean ones for the OCD troopers, a couple of breathing apparatuses, and of course heads. The bodies have next level detailing on them and are some of the most vibrant of any Imperial armor I've seen. Mimban troopers are hands down my favorite Imperial unit now. As you all know, I'm a Clone Wars fanboy to my core, so my Imperial minifig collection is smaller than Palpatine's wrinkle cream budget, but I've been prepping for this mock for months and slowly accumulating various Imperial soldiers, officers, and crewmen. When it comes to the mud troopers, I've gone mostly the custom route. LEGO does have an official Mimban trooper, but to say it's expensive is an understatement. The detail on these is insane, from the arm and leg printing to the mud splattered on their boots and armor. Mimban's not going to be as drab as I initially thought, with these vibrant troopers walking around on the colorful ground. And just wait until you see what I have planned for the rebels. I was not prepared for how excited I got to start Mimban this week. It was like young Ethan on Christmas morning all over again. Because I took my previous mock Megito to Brick Fair, Virginia, I had a longer break than I normally do between big projects. And during that break, I was mostly doing mock challenge videos. I didn't realize how much I missed building big mocks and filming these weekly updates. It's really nice to slow things down and focus more on my craft and creating high quality builds. Next week, I'm going to start on the other side of the mock where the Imperial base is, as well as showcasing some fearsome Mimbanese rebels. But that wraps up this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to let me know what you think about week 1 in the comments, and I will catch you next time. But until then, happy building.